Om, 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 Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So welcome, Namaste. I bow to the indwelling spirit within each and every one of you. So welcome. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about purifying the mind and how to remove fears. Okay, so that's the topic. And in case you don't know, all of you should know, I'm Rudra Shivananda, and it's my pleasure to talk to you. And, I hope you will enjoy this particular talk. Now, before I start this talk, I wanted to share with you two stories. Okay, these are two stories about mad elephants. Okay, so there are many stories about mad elephants because India, they have many elephants, and sometimes they behave, badly, or they get into trouble. So this is a story about two mad elephants. And you should remember these two stories when I'm talking about the mind and about fear. Okay, they're used to illustrate what I am trying to share with you today. So the first story is the story about the Lord Buddha. Okay, so this is a time when the Lord Buddha is still teaching and walking around and going from place to place. Now, his cousin, who really doesn't like the Lord Buddha, is called Devdutt, and he has been trying to kill the Lord Buddha because the Lord Buddha was a prince and would be actually next in line for king. So this Devdutt has been trying to kill him for many years and many times. So this particular time, he thought of having this elephant, in this area where the Lord Buddha is going to come. He made the elephant drink some alcohol and get drunk. And then when he saw that the Lord Buddha was coming and in sight, he started beating the elephant. Okay, so he kept beating the elephant. The elephant is drunk and he's, really painful. And he started, running, straight at the Lord Buddha. Okay, now the Lord Buddha is talking to his disciples while he's walking, and then he sees this elephant running at him. Now the Lord Buddha has purified his mind, has gone beyond the mind into highest consciousness. Okay, so he immediately felt that the elephant was in pain. And so he started sending out compassion and love to the elephant. See, the Lord Buddha doesn't think. Okay, and we'll talk about that a little later. There are no thoughts in the Lord Buddha. He just does what he does, okay, in super conscious state. And so he started sending love and compassion to the elephant. And the elephant felt the healing power of the Lord Buddha's compassion and calmed down because of the love he was sending him. And so he just calmed down, started walking slowly and knelt down at the feet of the Lord Buddha, and the Lord Buddha blessed the elephant. Okay, so that's the first story of the mad elephant. Now, the second story of the mad elephant is the one that the Paramhans Ramakrishna, a great saint of India, loved to tell this story. He found it very funny. Okay, so in this story, he says that there was this saint who was giving a talk to his disciples one evening. And he was telling the disciples, Everybody is one. God is in everything, and in everybody, in the animals, in people, everywhere is God, and we are one with God. Okay, so we are one with all living beings. So he was telling his disciples. So the next morning, the disciples, they started going out to beg for food, because they are monks. Okay, so they go around, on this road, and coming at them from a little distance is this elephant running and making a lot of sound. And then there's the mahout. The mahout is the elephant, trainer, the rider who rides and makes the elephant go this way and that. And the mahout was shouting, "Move aside, move aside. The elephant is mad. The elephant is mad. Don't stand there. Move aside, move aside." Okay. So all the disciples ran off the road and hid so that they be safe. But one of the disciples remembered what the master had said. And so the disciple thought, but elephant is God. I'm one with God. He won't harm me. We're one. So he stood there, and the elephant went by and just wiped him out with his trunk. I mean, he got hurt. He didn't get killed, but he was hurt, and he was lying on the side of the road, bleeding and hurt. And all the other disciples came, picked him up, brought him back to the ashram, and told the master. And the master asked the disciple, "Why didn't you run away? Why didn't you move aside?" And the disciple said, "But you said that God is everywhere, and God is in the elephant too." Okay, but he still came and hit me. Okay, so the master said, "Yes, God is in the elephant, but God is also in the mahout." The mahout said to move aside. Why didn't you listen to God when the God told you to move aside? And Ramakrishna would laugh, and he found it very funny. Now, the key to understanding, there are many levels to understand this particular story. Okay, but for our purpose, it's important just to remember the disciple had thoughts. His mind was not purified. Okay, he may have a concept that we are all one, but he had not actually realized that we are one. Unlike the Buddha, okay, who is one with all being, with all things, nothing can harm the Lord Buddha. Okay, he has no fear because his mind was purified long ago, and he was way beyond that. Purification of the mind is the doorway to higher consciousness. Okay, so he had already done all that. Whereas this disciple was only memorizing and having thoughts, and he thought he could just, think that we are all one. But thinking is not enough. In fact, we have to transcend all thoughts, and that's what is meant by actually purifying the mind. Okay, so when you have a thought, don't try to stand in front of a mad elephant. That is the thing to remember. Okay, the thing that you need to learn, what you have learned from this particular story. Okay, so now I'm going to begin the actual lecture for tonight, or talk, and I'll be using some slides because it's easier for you to see it and easier to remember. Okay, so so don't mind if I'm a little picture in the side. You'll get used to it. Om Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshvara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I pay respects to my Satguru. Now we can begin. So the agenda for today, I'm going to talk about why do we need to purify the mind. I already sort of hinted at that. And then I'm going to give you a model of the mind. Okay, it's actually a model of our coming into this world. It is also the model where we get back to our home, our source. So you see, where did we come from and where are we going back home to? That is this model I want to present to you. Okay. Then I'm going to talk to you how thoughts are generated. There's a model for that I will talk to you about. Then I'll briefly talk about the systems of mind purification. These are the systems of yoga that you will be familiar with. And one of them, at least most of us are on that path, okay, the spiritual path of Kundalini Kriya Yoga. Then I'll briefly talk about the tools of mind purification. Most of the different yogas have a variety of tools. Okay, so they have common tools that they share with other paths. And then these tools will just mention them. So that's the first part of my talk. And then I'm going to talk to you about fear. Okay, why we want to talk about fear. It's very important. I mean, we all know we have fear, right? Right now, a lot of people in the world have fear, but humanity is never without fear. But right now, because of the coronavirus, everybody in lockdown and being worried, fear is very much upfront. Most of the time for us, fear is in the background, okay? But fear is always sort of coloring and tainting our thoughts, whether we are aware of it or not, sometimes strongly, sometimes weakly, okay? But it's always there in some form or the other. A little bit of fear, a lot of fear, okay? Never no fear, okay? That's important to remember. Then I'm going to talk about the types of fears and how, fears affect our health. I'll also talk about some ways that we use to remove the fear. Right? So that's what we can do tonight. So I hope that you will enjoy this. Okay? So what do we mean by purifying the mind? Why do you want to purify the mind? Okay, so let us look to Lord Krishna. In the Bhagavad Gita, he said that one must elevate and do not degrade oneself by one's own mind. The mind alone is one's friend as well as one's enemy. The mind is the friend of those who have control over it and acts like an enemy for those who do not control it. Okay, so we all know how important the mind is, but in school, you never talk about the mind when you were in grade school, high school, university, unless you're taking some psychology. Then they talk about the Western ideas about the mind. But they don't talk about purifying it or going beyond the mind, because there is no model in Western psychology like we have in the yogic model, which I will introduce to you. Now, the Lord Buddha said in the Dhammapada, we are what we think. All that we are arises from our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world, speak or act with an impure mind, and trouble will follow you, as the wheel follows the one that draws the cart. So if you have an impure mind, trouble follows you. That is the karma that you're going to have. Now, he also said, speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness will follow you as your shadow, unshakable. So the Lord Buddha tells us how important a pure mind is. He also said, your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own thoughts, unguarded. But once mastered, no one can help you as much, not even your father or mother. Okay? So the mind can be your best friend, or the mind can be your worst enemy. It's what you do with it. Okay, that's important to know. And yoga and meditation have many tools to control and purify the mind. Now, this is a model that I like. There are more than one model of our descent into this world. Okay, and some are more complicated and some are more simpler. Okay, but I like this particular one, and I like introducing it to you. So in this model, we start with what we call the unmanifest consciousness. Okay, this is without any attributes. Okay, this may be what the Lord Buddha called emptiness, because you cannot describe it. It's without any characteristics, without any attributes. But even though it's without any attributes, it doesn't stop the yogis from calling it something, giving it a name. And they called it Param Shiva. Okay, but Param Shiva is nirgun. It has no characteristics. Now, at some time or the other, at the, even before the beginning of time, the unmanifest, there was a vibration. And don't ask me why there was a vibration. Okay, we call that the nod. And because of this little vibration came the Shiva Shakti. Now, Shiva Shakti still is without characteristics, but now there is the potential to create, the potential to manifest. So Shiva Shakti is the creative potential. It's still not creation yet. And then by the power of the Shiva Shakti, which is called Maya, okay, Maya has certain restrictions. So when Maya operates on the effects of Shiva Shakti, Maya creates time, space, power, limited power. All of these things come from, a primordial desire. It's not the kind of desire we're talking about, but there's a primordial desire. And that's also one of the Maya characteristics. Okay, so these restrictions, when they are applied, spirit formed. Now, spirit is still Purush, is still without characteristics. It's spirit, it's Atma. But the spirit creates Prakriti. Okay, Prakriti is the counterpart of Shakti. So we call it the Divine Mother. Okay, And inside the divine, or the power of the divine mother, has three primordial characteristics, the gunas. And we call those tamas, rajas, and sattva. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, but this tamas, rajas, and sattva is all that sort of conditions all manifestation, all mind, all matter. Okay, so mind and matter are just different levels of the same thing. Just like there are different lights, wavelengths of light. Mind is not spirit. Okay, mind is still matter, but a very fine matter. Okay. From this prakriti comes the universal mind. In the universal mind is the different characteristics of a lower mind, a function of, we call the I maker, ahankar, because in creation, the creation distinguishes itself from another. I am not you. You are not me. That is the ego. That is the ahankar. Ahankar is not the ego. Ahankar is the ego maker. Okay, so in the universal mind, you have the ego maker to differentiate us from each other. The individualization. Okay, that is ahankar. But we also have the buddhi. The buddhi is the higher mind. Higher mind is the mind that is connecting to the spirit. Okay, but it is still colored by the gunas. And when it goes to the soul has no direct control over the buddhi. The I maker, okay, actually is in between the buddhi and the lower mind, the manas. Manas is the word which means mind, but it also is the word for Manu, the first man. Okay, so mind, man, humankind, it just means the being with a mind. And it all comes from manas. Okay, so the universal mind moves into creation. And 5 elements, the Mahabhutas, come from the universal mind. These are the elements of earth, water, fire, air, space, ether. Okay, so from these elements, you have the senses, the emotions, and the physical matter. Okay, the elements that we talk about in chemistry or physics, we call matter. They come from the universal elements. Combinations of those 5 elements make the senses and the emotions, and everything we are from the 5 elements physically. Okay, so this is how we become, okay, from the material manifestation, all sorts of beings are created. Some beings are more fine. We have not met such beings. We can call them like angels. Okay, other beings are more dense, like us. Okay, we have the 3-dimensional space, but there are other beings who have 5 dimension or higher of space, their body. Okay, so there are many different types of matter and being. So what does this tell us? What can you get from this particular model? Okay, quickly. So the first thing you want to know is that we have more than one mind. Okay, we have a lower mind called manas. This is the mind with the thoughts. Okay, so the thoughts we have, we're always in thoughts, thinking. Okay, Descartes said that I think, therefore I am, but he's only operating on the manas, which operates on the five senses. Okay, so that is a limitation of manas. Another limitation of manas is that it is conditioned by the ego. The other mind we have, which we call buddhi, okay, that some people, they call that, oh, that's the intellectual mind, or that's the inspirational mind, but I prefer to call it higher mind, or the mind of awareness. Okay, there are different levels of awareness, but at the level of buddhi, you're in awareness, you're not thinking. Okay, so when you are in buddhi, you have purified your mind. Okay, so you are in the universal mind field. Once you have gone into the buddhi, and buddhi is the mind that you use all the time, then you are in the universal mind and you've purified your lower mind. Okay, that's what purification of mind means. Going from manas into buddhi. But before you can go from manas into buddhi, you have to purify the manas too. Because I will show you in the next slide, maybe, let's see, what's the next slide? Yes, we talked about the gunas. Okay, so these three gunas control the manas to a very high degree. So some people, they are very active. We call them rajasic. Okay, so they always want to do something, go somewhere. They look for their fulfillment outside. Okay, so we call them rajasic. There are the tamasic people. Okay, so they are strong. They have more of this tamas characteristic, which is that promotes, they don't want to do anything. It's totally opposite to the rajas, is that in the tamas, the people don't want to do anything. Okay, but they can give rise to a lot of desires. I mean, all the gunas can give rise to desires, but the tamas has more in sensuality and desires than the other gunas, because it's very inertial. It doesn't want to do anything, but would like to think and think about things. But the thoughts they have are dark, and they're very ignorant thoughts. They always make mistakes in their thinking. Okay, so that's a problem with too much tamas. Now, sattva is an attribute of purity and light. Okay, so it just means that this particular characteristic, if you have more of it, then your thoughts are more pure, in the sense that you think about other people more, and you don't want to harm other people. So it's a good characteristic, but it's still part of the characteristic of the mind. Okay, so when we are born, because of our karma, we have a mixture of all these three gunas. Okay, so when we talk about purifying the manas, we're talking about increasing the amount of sattva. Okay, so if you increase the light and purity of the manas, then you become more pure in your mind. That's what we're talking about. So we want to decrease the rajas and the tamas. Okay, so meditation helps to do that. The spiritual practice, whatever you're doing, helps to do that. Devotion to God, devotion to the Lord, okay, the bhakti helps to remove the tamas and the rajas and promote sattva. Okay, so when the mind, the manas become more sattvic, then we say the manas is more pure. Okay, but the manas will always have thoughts. Okay, so in order to still the thoughts, you actually have to go beyond the manas into the buddhi. So from the previous foil you saw, there is the buddhi. Okay, so you need to go into this higher mind. And when you're able to go into this higher mind, you can jump beyond from the universal mind to what we call the universal consciousness, which is here. But it is not a quick thing, okay? The spiritual path, there is self-realization, God realization, okay, cosmic consciousness. Okay, so there are many steps to return to the unmanifest, the nirgun, okay? Before we can get to the nirgun, we have to pass through the sagun, the divine with characteristics. So when we reach the Atma or the Purush, then we have realized our true self. So it's a model that helps you to identify where you are. We are here somewhere at the bottom here, and we're trying to raise ourselves up through this chain, okay, and go through our different minds. So purity of mind is important because that's the doorway. Without having a pure mind, you cannot pass. Okay? The gate, the door is locked for you. So now I want to talk to you about the thought, because in order to purify the mind, you have to minimize desire and you have to minimize karma, because if you generate more karma, the karma is going to increase the impurity of your mind. Right? So this is one way to look at it, okay? This model of a thought. So in a yogic model, your soul presence, what we call the Jiv Atma, the soul, okay, acts on or intends from the intent of this soul. You remember, the soul is not the Atma, it's Jiva. It's already in matter. Okay, so it is confused already. Right? So the Jiva acts on the manas, ahankar, and the buddhi, the mental complex. Okay? And the mental complex comes out with a thought. But this thought actually is conditioned by our karma. In Western terminology, we call them attachments, biases, but it's really the action-reaction stored in our subconscious, the karma patterns, the imprints in our subconscious. They will color our thought. Our thought is not just a clean, pure thought. It's always composed of the emotional content, not yet emotion, but imprints that will lead to feelings and emotions. Because the thought is conditioned. It's not a pure thought. So if we want to do, there are certain meditations that you can do where you can actually cut at the thought complex and prevent even the thought from coming up. Okay, so, but that is a very difficult. You have to go into samadhi states in order to prevent a thought from happening. For most of us, the thought is going to lead to the feelings, and feelings will lead to emotions. And if we don't stop it, the emotions will lead to desire, desire lead to action, action lead to karma. And the karma comes back into the soul and into the manas, ahankar, buddhi complex. Okay, the mental complex programming. So when the karma goes to the soul presence, that is, goes to the sanchit karma. That is the karma that won't happen in this particular lifetime. But when the karma goes into this particular manas, ahankara, buddhi complex, then it is affecting our current lifetime. Okay, so that's the difference between these two karmic effects. Okay, the one that goes into the mental complex is having an effect in this lifetime. So most of our meditation and our willpower is being affecting between emotions and desires. We become aware of the emotion, and if we can use our will, we can stop it from manifesting into a desire, or we can let go of the emotion. If we have an emotion for a particular substance or a particular, let's say we feel a emotion that lead us to have a thought about a Porsche or a Lamborghini. Okay, so we're thinking Lamborghini are really beautiful looking, the emotion of wow, beauty and love of a Lamborghini. That's the emotion. Now, if we don't detach from that emotion of loving a Lamborghini, the loving of the Lamborghini is going to cause a desire to own a Lamborghini. Okay, that will have an effect that you want to buy it and then you take action. But how action? The Lamborghini is too expensive. So you either go to gamble to win money, or some people will go and steal money, or some people will do other things to try to get it, or other people will just feel bad they didn't fulfill their desire. Okay, which also will lead to karma, because an unfulfilled desire, when it comes to that, it leads to negative karma also. Okay, so it's important to break the connection between the emotion and the actual manifestation of the desire that I want this. Okay, loving something or admiring something, those are emotional responses. Once you detect that, then you should detach, let go of that emotion. Or you use your will and say, go away. I don't need this emotion. There's ways to do that also. Okay, so that's the point where you can do it. Once your desire is formed, it will lead to action sooner or later. So unfulfilled desires are like poison that acts on you. Okay, of course, there are ways to get rid of unfulfilled desires, but not for normal meditation. Again, you have to go into higher states of consciousness, and then you'll see these unfulfilled desires, and you can burn them up. But in your normal consciousness, in the mind, in the manas, you cannot burn away the desires. Okay, so that's, I feel, is a good model that can help you understand when you meditate where you should be meditating and how it's going to be affecting. Okay, and how thoughts generate and how thoughts lead to karma through the action. So this is a law of causation. Of course, it can become more complex than this. This is the simplest I can make it, but I think this is a very useful model. So just to reconfirm what I have been saying, how you need to purify the mind, why you need to purify the mind. Okay, I again going to quote Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. So Lord Krishna says, a person whose mind is unperturbed by sorrow, who does not crave pleasures, who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, such a person is called a sage of steady wisdom. Again, he says, rise above the three gunas and become self-realized. Okay. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna talks a lot about the three gunas and how it impacts everything within us and around us. For those who study Ayurveda, you know about the three gunas because the three gunas, affect the cause of the three physical characteristics of Pitta, Kapha, and Vata. And all food and medicine, you can be characterized by being in balance of these three principles of the Kapha, the Vata, and the Pitta. Okay, so imbalances in these three directly are connected to the three gunas. Okay, so again, the Lord Krishna said, when one transcends or rises above the three gunas that condition the mind, one is freed from pains of birth, old age, disease, and death. One attains immortality or mukti. Mukti means liberation, freedom. Okay, so that's just to remind you why we work to purify our mind. So the stages of purifying the mind that I've been talking to you about. Okay, so I already mentioned how you should increase the sattva in the manas. Okay, so that's purifying the manas. And then you actualize the awareness of Buddhi. That's when you get to the clear mind, the light mind. You can achieve the thoughtless state, okay, the thoughtless mind, which we call Nirvichara Samadhi, when you are fully in the Buddhi. And from the Buddhi, you can expand and you can reach the universal mind. And from universal mind, as you progress, you go into divine consciousness, okay, which has no limitation, which is beyond the gunas. Okay, so that is a progressive step that we want to go through. So what are these methods of purifying the mind? You should be very familiar with them, because even though they don't talk about purifying the mind, they are doing that. So it's very important. I mean, even in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, the first two padas that he talks about, which is the yam and the niyam, that is about purifying the mind, right? You have the ahimsa and the satya, parigraha, brahmacharya, astya. These are all attributes, virtues that you need to develop, and don't do the bad things that will make the mind impure. Okay, you have to avoid the yams, and you have to develop the niyams. Okay, the purity. The first one is purity. Purity means purity of not just the physical body, not just taking the physical bath, but actually purity of the mind. Okay, the next one is actually about the contentment. If you are contented, okay, Santosh, you don't have desires because you're contented. You don't crave. Okay? The Lord Buddha said the root of all anger and fear is actually craving. If you have contentment, you cannot be in a state of craving anything. So santosh is very important. Purity, such. So purity of the mind, purity of the body. Then you have the tap. Tap is actually some of the things we're talking about here. Tap means to practice. Okay, tap is practice. Mantra yoga requires a lot of time commitment to keep saying the mantra over and over and over again. Okay, and has to be very regular. Okay, so that is tap. Mantra yoga is a tap. Jnana yoga requires someone who's born with a sattvic mind already. People say, why can't I just sit down and see the reality and do inquiry, contemplation? In order to do that, you have to already be quite sattvic. Your mind has to be pretty pure in order for you to take the path of the gyan, the wisdom, the path of wisdom. Yeah. But it still, requires a pure mind. Raj Yoga requires concentration and control of the mind. In order to do that, in order to have great concentration, guess what? You have to develop your mind. So these are all tap. Tap means effort, means generating heat, means practice. Sadhana is a tap. So these are all yogas with a sadhana. Kundalini Kriya Yoga, which I teach. Okay? It requires heroic determination and perseverance, because when you are breathing and trying to raise the Kundalini, your mind is going other places. So you have to control the mind. The more pure your mind is, the easier it is to control and to bring it into your spine and to do the Kriya breath. If you do the Kriya breath and your mind is jumping everywhere else, your Kriya breath is not going to be very strong. Okay, so a pure mind is very important. And then we have the Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga requires someone who has a lot of devotion and positive emotional aptitude. So some of us are born with our minds and our karma, which will lead us to practice one or two of these paths more than the others. Karma Yoga requires a person who has the service before self attitude. Someone with a strong ego, very difficult for them to do the Karma Yoga. Because the Karma Yoga requires you to give up the fruits of your labor. You have to dedicate it to the divine. If someone with a strong ego, they want to be praised, they want to have credit, they want to be able to say that I achieved this. This is my achievement. Okay, so that is very difficult to do Karma Yoga if you have that kind of mentality. Right? So all of these methods have parts of it which purify the mind. Of course, the purpose of all of these yoga is to achieve self-realization. But in achieving self-realization, they all have different techniques in these paths which help you to purify your mind. Okay, in the Karma Yoga, it's the very act of offering up your service thinking of Lord when you're doing anything. That helps to purify the mind, because the power of thinking about Lord Krishna while you're in your activities, that helps to purify the mind and stop the karmic effects. So all of these have ways of doing it, but the purpose of all of these yoga is actually self-realization, right? Okay. So inside all of those paths, they all have certain tools, and the tools that are used in purifying the mind include mantras. Okay, so I have written about different types of mantras. There are sattvic mantras, which when you repeat these mantras, they help to condition your mind to be more sattvic. Okay, so that's very good tool. We use mantras in Kriya Yoga. Okay, mantras are used in other Kundalini Yoga and other types of yoga as well. Then you have the yajna, that is the fire ceremony, the external fire ceremony, where you offer up your negativity, your emotions, your bad thoughts, your desires, everything you offer up to the fire. Okay, that is one way to purify the mind. Okay. The yajna, which is internal, the internal fire ceremony, that is what we are doing when we do Kriya and Kundalini Yoga. When we offer up the outgoing breath into the incoming breath, okay, that is Kriya. Okay, that is what Lord Krishna actually calls the internal fire ceremony. It is a method of burning away your bad karma. It's a way of controlling your mind. When you burn away your bad karma, your mind becomes more pure over time. Another tool that we use is being aware. I always talk about wake up, be aware. Okay? Be aware of what you are thinking. Even if you're aware of your thoughts, you're aware of your emotions, you're aware of your breath, you're aware of this or you're aware of that. That is very important, because that helps you to go and purify the negativity in your minds. Okay, let me check what's... okay. So another way to purify the mind is to detach, letting go. Okay, that's one of the ways. When you feel an emotion that has come from a thought, you can let go of that emotion. In that ways, you are purifying your mind. If you can, even in a higher level, if you're actually able to catch the thought as it comes out before it gives rise to feelings, or after it gives rise to feelings and before it gives rise to emotion, then you can actually stop the flow. You can let go earlier. Okay, so letting go or detachment is one way to purify the mind. Concentration and visualization is another way. Okay, so when we concentrate on one image, like an image of a star or image of the divine, our mind is molded in that image. Our mind forms that image, and that prevents the mind from being affected by the karma. Okay, if you can hold that image, the karma comes at it and it's destroyed. The karma is burnt away by that image of the divine, or by that star, or by the fire of your concentration. The more concentrated you are, all these attempts by the manas to impact your mind, your concentration, and if you don't let it do that, then your mind becomes less and less affected by karma, which means that it becomes more and more pure. And the more and more pure it is, the more easy it is for you to be concentrated. So it's like a effect, feedback effect. Okay, so the more you do concentration, the more pure your mind. The more pure your mind, the better you are able to concentrate. Okay, so that is a very positive method. Another way is to witness what's happening in your mind without being involved, right? This is very different from detachment. In detachment, you're watching and you say, let go, or you become non-attached. Whereas in the witnessing, you are going with the flow. Okay, so you are not involved. So you have no attachment with what's going on, but you still act. You're not stopping your action. That's called witnessing. Okay, so this is a very difficult and high method. Of course, we talk about mindfulness. Mindfulness is actually a group term where you have awareness, concentration, and witnessing. Okay, so different levels of mindfulness, but everybody is talking about mindfulness meditation. Okay, but mindfulness can be with the breath, it can be with a concept, okay, it can be with an image, it can be with a part of the body. Okay, so there are many different types of mindfulness that the Lord Buddha taught. So that's the first part of my presentation. Okay, talking about the mind, thoughts, and the purifying of the mind. So before I go to the second part, if there are any questions, people can type in any questions. I will spend a couple of minutes to see if there are any questions about what I have talked about so far.